Elena Torres, a vibrant transgender woman, never imagined that her life could end in horror. Lucas Greer, her volatile ex-boyfriend, Mark Rivers, a man with a simmering grudge, and Vanessa Clark, a jealous coworker, all played a role in a deadly puzzle. When Elena's mutilated body is found months later floating in a quiet Cleveland pond, the investigation unravels shocking secrets, conflicting alibis, and a chilling trail of forensic clues. Who had the motive, the means, and the cold-blooded precision to end her life? The answer lies hidden in the shadows, waiting for the truth to surface. On a foggy morning in Cleveland, the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. The streets were quiet, and only a few early risers wandered through the neighborhoods. At the edge of town, a narrow path led to a small, murky pond, a place locals often avoided after dark. It was there that a jogger noticed something unusual floating near the reeds. At first, it seemed like debris, perhaps a discarded bag or some broken branches. But as he drew closer, the shape became more defined, and a chill ran down his spine. The figure was human. Authorities were called immediately, and within minutes, police tape stretched across the area, cordoning off the scene. The pond's still surface had been disturbed, the water tinged with dark streaks that hinted at the horror beneath. Divers carefully waded into the shallow edges, their movements slow and deliberate, until the body was finally brought to shore. The woman's face was pale and unrecognizable, her dark hair matted against her skin. Her clothes were torn and damp, clinging to her body in unnatural ways. Each detail told a story of violence, of a life cut short and a struggle that had ended far from safety. The silence of the morning was broken by the murmurs of onlookers, their curiosity tinged with fear. Detectives arrived soon after, their expressions grim as they assessed the scene. Cameras clicked and notes were taken, but the weight of the discovery hung over everyone present. It was clear that this was no ordinary accident. The body in the pond was a clue, the first sign of a mystery that would soon grip the entire community. Somewhere beneath the calm surface, secrets waited to be uncovered. On a foggy morning in Cleveland, the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. The streets were quiet, and only a few early risers wandered through the neighborhoods. At the edge of town, a narrow path led to a small, murky pond, a place locals often avoided after dark. It was there that a jogger noticed something unusual floating near the reeds. At first, it seemed like debris, perhaps a discarded bag or some broken branches. But as he drew closer, the shape became more defined, and a chill ran down his spine. The figure was human. Authorities were called immediately, and within minutes, police tape stretched across the area, cordoning off the scene. The pond's still surface had been disturbed, the water tinged with dark streaks that hinted at the horror beneath. Divers carefully waded into the shallow edges, their movements slow and deliberate, until the body was finally brought to shore. The woman's face was pale and unrecognizable, her dark hair matted against her skin. Her clothes were torn and damp, clinging to her body in unnatural ways. Each detail told a story of violence, of a life cut short and a struggle that had ended far from safety. The silence of the morning was broken by the murmurs of onlookers, their curiosity tinged with fear. Detectives arrived soon after, their expressions grim as they assessed the scene. Cameras clicked and notes were taken, but the weight of the discovery hung over everyone present. It was clear that this was no ordinary accident. The body in the pond was a clue, the first sign of a mystery that would soon grip the entire community. Somewhere beneath the calm surface, secrets waited to be uncovered. The scene at the morgue was tense as Dr. Harold Benson, the city's lead medical examiner, carefully examined Elena's body. From the moment it arrived, it was clear that this was no ordinary drowning. The water had preserved some of the external injuries, but had also masked others, making the task of uncovering the truth more challenging. As he gently moved her hair aside, his eyes caught something that made his stomach tighten, a small glint embedded deep in her skull. The tip of a knife protruded from the back of Elena's head, angled precisely as if the killer had struck with purpose and knowledge. The wound was clean, surgical in its precision, suggesting that the attacker had planned the murder carefully. The weapon itself, however, was nowhere to be found, leaving a haunting question. Had it been taken away deliberately or lost somewhere in the pond's murky depths? Dr. Benson photographed and documented every detail, his mind racing to piece together the sequence of events. The angle of the blade, the lack of defensive wounds, and the absence of a struggle at the water's edge suggested that Elena had been ambushed, struck from behind, and then placed or dumped into the pond. The precision of the injury indicated experience, someone who had not acted on impulse but with intention and skill. The discovery sent ripples through the investigation team. Detectives began to realize that they were dealing with a killer who understood their methods, someone who had calculated the attack and perhaps even studied how to evade evidence. The pond was no longer just a crime scene. It had become a puzzle, each murky ripple hiding the story of Elena's final moments. The question that hung over everyone was chilling. Who could commit such a precise, cold-blooded act, and why had Elena become a target? Detectives soon focused on their first suspect, Mark Rivers, a local man known for his sharp temper and recent arguments with Elena. Rumors had spread through the neighborhood that a financial dispute between them had become heated, though no official complaint had been filed. The detectives considered every detail, from eyewitness accounts to social media posts, hoping to uncover a link between him and the murder. Mark lived alone in a small apartment not far from the pond, and neighbors described him as quiet but unpredictable. He kept to himself, rarely socializing beyond casual greetings, yet his past included confrontations with others that suggested a volatile nature. Investigators pored over his recent movements, checking security footage, phone records, and financial transactions. For a moment, it seemed as if they had found a connection. He had been seen near the pond just days before Elena's body was discovered. When questioned, Mark's demeanor was calm, almost eerily so. He insisted he had nothing to do with Elena's death and provided an alibi supported by friends who claimed he had been at a local bar during the estimated time of the murder. Detectives recorded every word, every hesitation, knowing that even the smallest detail could become significant later. Despite the circumstantial evidence, the investigation hit a frustrating wall. Mark had no direct connection to the knife tip found in Elena's skull, and forensic tests revealed nothing to link him physically to the scene. Yet the tension remained. He had motive, opportunity, and a history that made him difficult to ignore. The police knew that the first suspect often holds a key, and even with an alibi, they could not dismiss him entirely. The investigation was becoming a careful balance of suspicion, evidence, and the realization that appearances could be deceiving. As detectives delved deeper into Elena's past, a more complex picture of her life began to emerge. Outwardly, she had appeared cheerful and independent, but behind closed doors, she had been quietly anxious for weeks before her disappearance. Friends revealed that she had mentioned feeling watched and followed, though she never specified by whom. Messages of a threatening nature had arrived on her phone, some anonymous, some from numbers she did not recognize, all carrying a sense of menace that left her unsettled. Investigators began piecing together a timeline, retracing her steps in the days leading up to her death. She had often taken evening walks alone, always along familiar routes, yet on several occasions, she had reported strange encounters, a shadow that followed her, a car parked suspiciously at the corner, footsteps echoing behind her. Each detail, seemingly minor at the time, now hinted at a predator lurking close, someone who knew her habits and movements. The detectives also examined Elena's online presence, finding subtle threats embedded in social media comments and private messages. Some were dismissive, easily overlooked by a casual observer, but patterns emerged that suggested persistence, a focused attention on Elena that grew more intense with each passing day. Every friend she had confided in became part of the investigation, their testimonies painting a picture of escalating fear. This chapter of her life revealed that Elena's murder had not been random. The warning signs had existed, quietly escalating until they culminated in tragedy. Investigators understood that uncovering these overlooked details was crucial, not just to solving the crime, but to understanding the mindset of someone who had fixated on her. Each clue brought them closer to the chilling reality. Elena had known danger was near, but she could not escape it. Detectives soon turned their attention to Lucas Greer, Elena's ex-boyfriend, whose name had surfaced repeatedly during the investigation. Known for a volatile temper, Lucas had a reputation for arguing with anyone who crossed him. While their relationship had ended months earlier, acquaintances revealed that tensions had lingered, and some confrontations had been more than just verbal. Investigators wondered whether lingering anger or jealousy could have escalated into something far more dangerous. Lucas had a routine that made him hard to track. He spent nights working late at a local warehouse and was known to frequent bars afterward, often alone. Friends and coworkers provided statements that seemed supportive, suggesting he could not have been near the pond the night Elena disappeared. Yet the detectives were cautious. People often conceal truths to protect themselves or someone they care about. Every small detail about his behavior was scrutinized, from his travel patterns to the messages on his phone, in search of inconsistencies. Evidence was scarce at first, but something about his proximity to Elena in the weeks before her death raised red flags. He had been seen near her apartment, and several witnesses recalled tense exchanges that hinted at unresolved conflict. The question became whether these encounters were innocent or the precursor to a deadly plan. The investigation into Lucas grew more intense as detectives explored his connections, searching for anything that tied him to the crime. Though physical evidence was lacking, the psychological patterns, the arguments, the lingering resentment, the access to Elena's routines suggested motive and opportunity. Lucas had the means and potentially the intent. Detectives realized that understanding his state of mind could be key to unraveling the mystery, and the case was becoming increasingly personal, as if the killer's presence loomed over every step they took. As the investigation progressed, detectives were confronted with a frustrating and confusing reality. Each suspect offered conflicting accounts of their actions and whereabouts, creating a maze of contradictions. Mark Rivers insisted he had been at a local bar during the critical hours. Lucas Greer maintained he had been working late at the warehouse, and Vanessa Clark, the third suspect, claimed to have spent the evening at home alone. None of their stories aligned perfectly with the fragments of evidence collected, leaving investigators struggling to separate truth from deception. The inconsistencies made the case even more complex. Some witnesses offered varying accounts of seeing the suspects near Elena's neighborhood, but the details often conflicted. Tiny discrepancies, an extra hour here, a missing item there, suddenly took on huge significance. Each version of events seemed plausible on the surface, yet impossible to reconcile with the physical clues found at the crime scene. Detectives realized that the more they probed, the deeper the web of uncertainty became. Frustration grew within the team as each lead appeared to loop back into doubt. Every suspect had motive, and every alibi had gaps. While forensic science provided some direction, the conflicting statements threatened to derail the investigation entirely. It became clear that solving Elena's murder would not rely solely on conventional detective work. It would require meticulous analysis, patience, and the ability to spot hidden connections that were invisible at first glance. Amid the confusion, Dr. Benson continued his work in the morgue, carefully examining every piece of evidence. The pressure mounted, as the detectives knew that the killer had anticipated oversight and that the answers were hidden not in grand gestures, but in the smallest, almost imperceptible details. Every lie, every omission, and every contradiction could be the key to revealing the truth. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Dr. Harold Benson made a breakthrough that could finally unravel the mystery. While meticulously examining Elena's clothing and personal effects, he discovered microscopic traces of a rare industrial chemical. It was not something one would encounter in everyday life. Its presence suggested that Elena had come into contact with a very specific environment shortly before her death. This small clue, invisible to the untrained eye, became the most promising lead the detectives had seen in weeks. The chemical was traced to a small industrial workshop on the outskirts of Cleveland, a place few people visited. Further investigation revealed that one of the suspects, Lucas Greer, had a connection to the workshop. He had occasionally accessed the facility for work and had the means to encounter the substance without raising suspicion. The link was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it pointed toward a critical possibility. Lucas may have been present in an environment that left trace evidence on Elena's body or clothing, a connection the killer had not considered. Detectives rushed to gather additional forensic samples from the workshop, swabbing surfaces and analyzing equipment, searching for even the smallest indication that Elena had been there. Each sample was scrutinized for traces of DNA, fibers, or chemicals that could corroborate Dr. Benson's discovery. The tiniest detail could confirm the suspect's involvement or rule him out entirely, and the tension in the lab was palpable. This breakthrough injected new energy into the investigation. The microscopic chemical was no longer just an anomaly. It had become a bridge between the victim and the suspect. For the first time, detectives felt that they were closing in on a lead that could not be explained away, and the investigation began shifting from speculation to evidence-driven certainty. The case was far from over, but a path toward justice had finally appeared. The discovery of the chemical link led detectives to examine Lucas Greer's connection to the workshop in greater detail. On the surface, it had appeared to be a simple workplace, a place for occasional tasks and maintenance. But as investigators dug deeper, they found a network of hidden activities that Lucas had kept carefully concealed. The workshop was not only a place of work. It had become a private space where he could operate without scrutiny, a location where evidence could be hidden and actions concealed. Further investigation revealed that Lucas had been seen entering and leaving the workshop during the same nights Elena had been in the area. Surveillance footage, combined with witness statements, suggested that he had a level of familiarity with the space that went beyond casual use. The chemical traces found on Elena's clothing matched substances stored and used in the workshop, indicating that she had been in close proximity to Lucas there, either voluntarily or forcibly. Detectives began piecing together a chilling scenario. It seemed plausible that the murder had been planned in this secluded location, with the killer using the workshop as a place to prepare, execute, or even stage the crime. The knife tip embedded in Elena's skull might have been lost or removed before the body was moved to the pond, making the workshop the silent witness to the first part of the crime. The hidden connections did more than just place Lucas near the scene. They suggested motive and opportunity combined with premeditation. Every detail about his routines, his access to the workshop, and his interactions with Elena painted a picture of a man who had carefully orchestrated the crime. Detectives realized that uncovering the truth meant following the trail of subtle, almost invisible links, each one bringing them closer to understanding how Elena's life had been violently ended and where justice could finally catch up. As detectives dug deeper into Lucas Greer's alibi, cracks began to appear in his carefully constructed story. Initially, he had claimed to be working late at the warehouse the night Elena disappeared, supported by coworkers who had vouched for him. But a thorough review of security footage and time-stamped records revealed inconsistencies. Key moments were unaccounted for, gaps in the timeline that suggested he could have left the warehouse undetected and traveled to areas near the pond. Investigators also re-interviewed witnesses who had initially confirmed his presence at work. Under closer scrutiny, their recollections began to waver. Some admitted they had only seen him in passing and could not be certain of the exact times. Others had based their statements on assumptions rather than observation. Each small contradiction, when combined with the forensic evidence from the workshop and the chemical traces found on Elena, painted a more troubling picture. The detectives mapped out the sequence of events leading up to Elena's death. It appeared that Lucas had knowledge of her routines, understanding when and where she would be alone. The meticulousness of the crime, the precision of the knife strike, the disposal of the body in the pond, and the removal of the murder weapon suggested premeditation and careful planning. His alibi, once considered solid, now looked increasingly like an attempt to conceal critical moments when he could have carried out the crime. With each new discovery, the pressure mounted. Lucas's previously unquestioned statements were unraveling, and the forensic evidence now aligned uncomfortably with the timeline gaps. Detectives realized that the alibi he had relied on to avoid suspicion was crumbling, leaving him vulnerable to scrutiny. The investigation was no longer just about circumstantial clues. It was edging closer to a confrontation with a suspect who could no longer hide behind lies. Detectives soon turned their attention to Lucas Greer, Elena's ex-boyfriend, whose name had surfaced repeatedly during the investigation. Known for a volatile temper, Lucas had a reputation for arguing with anyone who crossed him. While their relationship had ended months earlier, acquaintances revealed that tensions had lingered, and some confrontations had been more than just verbal. Investigators wondered whether lingering anger or jealousy could have escalated into something far more dangerous. Lucas had a routine that made him hard to track. He spent nights working late at a local warehouse and was known to frequent bars afterward, often alone. Friends and coworkers provided statements that seemed supportive, suggesting he could not have been near the pond the night Elena disappeared. Yet the detectives were cautious. People often conceal truths to protect themselves or someone they care about. Every small detail about his behavior was scrutinized, from his travel patterns to the messages on his phone, in search of inconsistencies. Evidence was scarce at first, but something about his proximity to Elena in the weeks before her death raised red flags. He had been seen near her apartment, and several witnesses recalled tense exchanges that hinted at unresolved conflict. The question became whether these encounters were innocent or the precursor to a deadly plan. The investigation into Lucas grew more intense as detectives explored his connections, searching for anything that tied him to the crime. Though physical evidence was lacking, the psychological patterns, the arguments, the lingering resentment, the access to Elena's routines suggested motive and opportunity. Lucas had the means and potentially the intent. Detectives realized that understanding his state of mind could be key to unraveling the mystery, and the case was becoming increasingly personal, as if the killer's presence loomed over every step they took. With Lucas's alibi beginning to collapse, Dr. Harold Benson's forensic analysis became the centerpiece of the investigation. He painstakingly reconstructed the night of Elena's death, using every available piece of evidence: the angle of a knife wound, trace fibers on her clothing, chemical residues, and even the pattern of water in the pond. Each detail allowed him to create a timeline of the final hours of her life, revealing events that no witness could fully account for. The medical examiner determined that Elena had likely been ambushed near her apartment. The angle of the knife wound suggested a sudden strike from behind, executed with precision and control, leaving no time for defense. Microscopic chemical traces indicated that the attack, or at least part of the struggle, had occurred in the industrial workshop connected to Lucas. Fibers from his clothing found on Elena's jacket confirmed physical contact, and tiny amounts of her DNA were detected on items in the workshop, evidence of a close encounter. By analyzing the combination of physical evidence and movement patterns, Dr. Benson reconstructed how Lucas could have lured or forced Elena into the workshop, executed the attack, and moved her body to the pond to hide it. The careful planning and calculated actions suggested premeditation, making it clear that the crime was not impulsive but deliberate. This forensic timeline allowed detectives to visualize the killer's movements, bridging the gap between speculation and certainty. It showed where the crime began, how it unfolded, and the methods used to cover tracks. For the first time, the investigation shifted from theory to concrete evidence, and the detectives realized that the puzzle of Elena's murder could finally be solved. Each minute reconstructed by Dr. Benson brought them one step closer to identifying the killer and achieving justice. The moment detectives had been working toward finally arrived. Lucas Greer was arrested. The culmination of weeks of painstaking investigation, forensic breakthroughs, and unraveling alibis had led directly to him. Officers approached his apartment quietly in the early morning, the weight of the evidence pressing on them as they prepared to confront a man who had, until now, seemed untouchable. Lucas did not resist, but his calm demeanor did nothing to conceal the tension in the room. During questioning, the inconsistencies in his story became impossible to ignore. Each attempt to explain gaps in his timeline was contradicted by surveillance footage, witness statements, and the growing forensic record. The chemical traces from the workshop, fibers from his clothing on Elena's jacket, and the DNA evidence all pointed directly to him. Even the tip of the knife embedded in Elena's skull, although the full weapon remained missing, aligned with the type of blade found in his possession weeks earlier. The evidence formed a web that left no room for doubt. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Friends, neighbors, and Elena's family struggled with a mix of relief and grief, knowing that justice was finally within reach, yet mourning the life lost. Detectives were careful to document every moment, ensuring that the case against Lucas would hold in court. The meticulous investigation, once fraught with uncertainty and conflicting accounts, had reached a turning point. With Lucas in custody, the focus shifted to compiling the evidence, connecting every forensic detail, and preparing for the legal battle ahead. The arrest did not erase the horror of Elena's murder, but provided clarity. The man responsible for her death had been identified. The painstaking work of detectives and Dr. Benson had brought the case from a perplexing mystery to a situation where justice could finally be pursued. News of Lucas Greer's arrest spread quickly through the Cleveland community, leaving residents in shock. Elena Torres had been known as a kind and quiet presence, and the revelation that someone from her own circle could commit such a calculated act left many struggling to process the reality. Her friends and family experienced a mixture of relief and devastation. Relief that the person responsible had been caught, devastation that the loss could never be undone. Community members organized vigils and memorials in Elena's honor, gathering to share stories and remember her life. People who had never met her personally spoke of the tragedy, emphasizing the senselessness of her death and the vulnerability that had been exploited. Local media covered every detail of the investigation, highlighting both the meticulous work of detectives and the breakthroughs achieved by Dr. Benson. The case became a symbol of both fear and resilience, a reminder of how a community can rally together in the face of horror. Meanwhile, investigators continued to scrutinize the remaining suspects. While evidence overwhelmingly pointed to Lucas, questions lingered about the other individuals involved in Elena's life. Vanessa Clark and Mark Rivers were revisited to ensure no loose ends remained, and the detectives were careful to confirm that justice would be comprehensive. The painstaking work underscored the importance of leaving no detail unexplored, even when a primary suspect had been apprehended. The emotional toll on the community was immense. Families became more vigilant, neighbors looked out for one another, and discussions about safety, trust, and accountability permeated local conversations. While the arrest offered a sense of closure, it also sparked reflection on the broader issues that had led to Elena's vulnerability. The case served as both a cautionary tale and a call for vigilance, leaving the community forever changed by a tragedy that had once seemed unfathomable. The trial of Lucas Greer marked the final chapter in the tragic story of Elena Torres. Courtrooms were packed as prosecutors presented a compelling case built on the meticulous work of detectives and the precise forensic analysis conducted by Dr. Harold Benson. Every piece of evidence, chemical traces, fibers, DNA, and witness accounts, was laid out in detail, leaving little room for doubt. The defense attempted to challenge the timeline and question the reliability of witnesses, but the overwhelming forensic record made the argument tenuous. Throughout the proceedings, the atmosphere was tense. Elena's family attended every session, their grief mixed with a determination to see justice done. Friends and community members filled the courtroom, silently bearing witness to the painstaking process that had finally brought accountability. The judge and jury listened intently as the medical examiner reconstructed the night of Elena's murder, explaining the precise sequence of events that led to her death. Each fact, Each minute detail painted a chilling picture of premeditation and intent. After days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Lucas Greer was found guilty of first-degree murder. Relief swept through the courtroom, tempered by the recognition that no legal outcome could restore the life that had been lost. For Elena's family and the community, the conviction was a bittersweet acknowledgment that justice, while delayed, had been achieved through diligence, patience, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. The case of Elena Torres became a lasting reminder of the power of forensic science, careful investigation, and community resilience. While her death left a permanent void, it also illuminated the importance of vigilance, empathy, and accountability. In the end, justice was served, and the meticulous work of those who refused to let evidence be ignored ensured that Elena's story would not be forgotten, leaving a legacy that honored her memory and highlight.